Hey Google, when is Labor Day in Canada?
Hey everyone. Today is Labor Day in Canada, in Montreal. Thanks everyone for coming out to this Canadian foreign policy.
Eve, you're muted.
I'm coming to, hey everyone, I'm coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal, and it of course is Labor Day today, so it might be a little bit of a smaller session, and there's no guests today, so I'll leave time for questions and comments and whatever else people want to talk about. I had a few issues that I thought I would begin with. First of all, there was the Toronto Air Show, the Canadian International Air Show, this past weekend, today, in and around Toronto. And like usual, the Canadian forces are use these air shows as a promotion of the Air Force. And that's something that's goes back like a century of the Air Force using air shows to basically promote militarism, and a bunch of different, there's obviously the snowbirds, and that's the whole point of the snowbirds. They've been going on for half a century now, is really just about promoting the Canadian Air Force, and it's obviously can be exciting for kids and others to watch the air show, but the underlying motivation clearly of the snowbirds and the CF demonstration team is to promote the Air Force and the Canadian military. And last year, the F-35 was part of the Toronto Air Show, and that was sort of part of this whole push to have Canada purchase the F-35, which the Trudeau government announced, despite that campaign calling for that money to be put into more socially and ecologically useful endeavors. And there still is a no fighter jet campaign. Obviously, Trudeau's announcement of the F-35 is a bit of a blow to that campaign. But there in Switzerland, there's actually a referendum on whether they're to buy the F-35. So there is some dissent, national referendum. So there's some dissent, still continues to be some dissent on the question of the fighter jet purchase that is sucking up so much public resources at a time of a climate breakdown, at a time of all kinds of social, much more important social concerns, be it healthcare, daycare, etc. And so and it also gets back to what Canadian fighter jets have been used for. They've bomb Libya, bomb Serbia, bomb Iraq. That's the history of Canadian fighter jets, and giving greater tools to the Canadian Air Force is just going to increase their capacity to wage war and devastation. In Port-au-Prince today, there's a demonstration again against the Ariel Henry, the installed prime minister, that sort of head of state that was basically installed by a tweet. And it gets almost no attention in our media, but there is a tweet by the Canadian US government-led core group. So there's been protests all the last couple of weeks, major protests across the country. Almost no attention in our media. Those protests have to be seen as protests against Canadian policy in Haiti. Yesterday, unfortunately, there was the Chilean constitution was defeated by a surprisingly large margin. It was a pretty progressive step forward, something that Canadian mining companies and other corporations in Chile were clearly threatened by. The Financial Post had a big article about Canadian mining companies that were worried about the Constitution. and more generally the left-wing or social democratic government that's been in office for about, I guess, around half a year. And so unfortunately, that was a blow to those wanting see more of the progressive social transformation in Latin America. And there was a really heavy campaign, disinformation campaign against the Constitution. I haven't seen any investigations about Canadian mining companies and their spending, but it's my assumption that Canadian mining companies were involved in that process of demonizing the Constitution and ultimately undermining that process. A few days ago, it came out further evidence of CSIS, the Canadian Intelligence Agency, their role in child trafficking into Syria. And basically 3 British citizens, I think they were 15 and 16-year-old girls, were facilitated from the Istanbul bus station, I believe, into Syrian territory that ISIS controlled. And this is an issue that's been a big issue in Britain. Two of the girls are died, and then the third one is stuck in a prisoner camp of ISIS, former ISIS, and she had a baby, and I believe her baby died in a really terrible way. And it's quite a grim story. But what's come out is the further, I guess there was been bits of this evidence, but confirmed in a book by about the Five Eyes intelligence apparatus, that the CSIS agent in Turkey, a CSIS asset, not an agent, somebody who was on the payroll of CSIS, facilitated, basically helped these girls get into Syria. And Trudeau was asked about it a few days ago, and he basically provided just a blanket defense of the Canadian Intelligence Agency. Say there's good oversight. You got to have a lot of latitude in the fight against terrorism and stuff like that. And this whole affair is quite dubious for a bunch of reasons. One of the things that's kind of caught up in this question is that Stephen Harper, he appointed the ambassador he appointed to Jordan, which is where this CSIS asset was reporting. It was his former bodyguard, a top bodyguard for Stephen Harper, who was an RCMP agent, so had no diplomatic background. That created a bit of a stir back when that appointment was made. But it was like a little unclear, like what this was. Was this just sort of like helping somebody who was like a friend or bodyguard that you liked out, or if there maybe was some more of a political background? We still don't know. But this business of CSIS agents, ferrying or trafficking, if you like, girls into ISIS-controlled areas of Syria, is kind of adds to this sort of idea that Canada was playing a pretty big role in intelligence gathering. It's not maybe in the war in Syria. Anyways, it seems quite sort of a fishy kind of situation that deserves a lot more attention. There was a call for a inquiry, which I believe the Trudeau government refused or denied. And I think the opposition MPs should be pressing on this matter, because it does seem like it's a pretty, just what we know in the public domain is pretty dubious about, child trafficking, but also possibly broader questions about Canada's role in Syria, appointing RCMP agents as ambassadors, and stuff like that. One other subject I wanted to bring up, discuss a bit, because it's got just a ton of media attention over the past week or so, is this whole question of disruptions and what happened to Chrystia Freeland a little while ago in Alberta, where a really kind of boorish guy yelled at her sexist comments and was sort of very disparaging of the deputy prime minister and finance minister. And the media since then has gone into a whole like tirade about how we got to protect our politicians more, and incivility of Canadian political life, and this is just some like terrible thing that happened. And clearly, what the guy said, I obviously don't agree with what he said. Like, you're not welcome in Alberta, and he was clearly a sort of far right individual that was behind this, and the sexism. But the idea that we want all politicians or ministers to always have RCMP with them or have police with them, and that members of the public shouldn't have access to the politicians is quite a dangerous direction. And that's where things are going. And unfortunately, a lot of progressive-minded people are going along with it. And I think part of it is sort of bringing together of some like sort of identity politics kind of dynamics. Like this was sort of a threatening towards a woman. And of course, there's an element to that in this, but Chrystia Freeland is not primarily a woman. She is primarily a deputy prime minister, longtime foreign minister, second most powerful person in the country. And there's sort of some elements of progressive thought have gone along with the Liberals kind of positioning this from a sort of identity politics kind of standpoint. And I think that's very dangerous. And I think that like what happens if politicians are not, if we can't challenge politicians directly, what we're left with is the media challenging politicians, and quite frankly, a specific sliver of the media, the dominant media, the people who have access, the people who are in the big corporate outlets and whatnot. And it's particularly dangerous on foreign policy, because quite frankly, the media are not going to ask any of the or very few of the important questions on Canadian foreign policy. And I can say personally, as someone who has actually disrupted Chrystia Freeland at least 3 times, one of those occasions, well, 2 of those occasions, we were able to change, me and others who were part of the disruptions, were able to prod the members of the media who were there to ask the right questions, some of the right questions of Freeland. About whether Canada was actually at war with Russia, because Canadian special forces were on the ground in Ukraine. And then in the other disruption, asked questions about the increase of Canadian military spending. This was a few days after they announced a big increase in military spending. So it's, I think, very troubling. There's a long left-wing tradition of challenging politicians, heckling politicians, and to cede this ground to far right forces is very problematic. We don't want in the popular imagination to be the one side. You have the Liberal Party and all that comes with that, and the opposition to that is sort of far right people, because there's lots of people who are not necessarily on the far right, but are quite critical of the Liberals. And if the opposition is just coming from that direction, they may slide that way politically, which is not something that we want. And so I have a video actually of a disruption I did this week, which I'm going to try to play in just 1 second.
Told me that the Department of Kinesiology.
Madame Fortier, do McGill students have the right to oppose Israel killing Palestinian children? Do they have the right to oppose Israeli colonialism and apartheid? Do they have that right? your administration responded to 71% of students voting for a Palestine solidarity policy. Your administration responded by threatening the funding of the Student Society. You threatened the funding of the Student Society. Do they have the right to oppose Israeli colonialism and apartheid? Do they have that right? Your anti-democratic and anti-Palestinian policies are shameful, Madame Fortier. Free Palestine! Right? You're complicit. You're complicit in Israeli colonialism and violence. You're complicit. No to your anti-democratic, anti-Palestinian policies. Shame on you. Anti-democratic, anti-Palestinian policies. The students have the right. The students have the right to vote. The students have.
So that was the head of McGill University at an announcement, Suzanne Fortier, at an announcement of a $29 million contribution to set up I think it's called the Sylvian Adams Sports Center, Athletic Sports Center. I forget the exact name. Sylvan Adams is a prominent anti-Palestinian, someone who spent tens and tens of millions of dollars trying to whitewash Israel's colonialism and apartheid. And in March, students at McGill voted, 71% of undergrads voted to a very good Palestine solidarity policy to boycott different companies complicit in Israeli colonialism. And the administration responded by threatening the funding arrangement with the Student Society. And that prompted the Student Society to not ratify the resolution. And then there's a whole bunch of developments that have taken place since then, including the actual SPHR, the Palestine Solidarity Group, having their club status suspended for 3 months and whatnot. So that was a disruption. It was kind of interesting. There's actually a fair bit of media in the room. From what I can tell, no media covered the disruption. At one point, you see me pausing, having difficulty coming out with my words, and it's because I was trying to pull out my sign from my bag that said "Free Palestine" and hold it up, try to get to the front of the room next to the as close as possible to the principal of McGill, and hold the sign up because that's a good image to for the cameras and photographers. I didn't get quite as close as I would have wanted to from an optics standpoint, but the media just didn't cover it at all. And it was even the announcement was on the front page of the Montreal Gazette, and it really just read as a press release. And so I think that, but online on Twitter, the video got watched by like 100,000 people. So even though it was like this really narrow issue, which is just like McGill University, it got really wide circulation on Twitter. And I think it's important because it's important to tell people around the world, and McGill's a very well-known university, to tell people that 71% of undergrads voted for this Palestine resolution, and then also to embarrass the administration, with whatever, if the dominant media won't do it, then through this kind of mechanism. And I was planning on going to do this disruption when I first heard about it a few days earlier. And at that point, it wasn't even announced. It wasn't who the funding announcement wasn't announced. It wasn't until that morning that they announced that it was Sylvan Adams. And like I said, Sylvan Adams is this. A few days earlier, he was at the 125th anniversary of the Zionist convention, and he made this terrible remark about how Israel is for all Jews around the world, a remark that just completely erases the Palestinians. And he's this big campaigner. So it was really appropriate to disrupt the event in the context of this. And also and part of the announcement was a partnership between this new institute at McGill and Tel Aviv University, where Adams had set up a similar type initiative, I guess, a few years ago. So disruptions are really important, and I know there's some people on this call who've been involved in some of these disruptions, and we should be doing more of them. We shouldn't be going along with this media kind of backlash against disruption just because there's some right wing boorish kind of people that engage in when they do this. And I should also mention that the liberals really like to hype up the right-wing attacks, right? So I've disrupted Trudeau multiple times, Freeland multiple times, Mélanie Joly multiple times. Never have they ever engaged with any of the substance, right? Never is there a denunciation the next day, right? But when it's the right-wing forces, during the last election when it was the anti-mask type crowd, they love hyping that up. Right, but the sort of left-wing substance-based criticism, they don't like hyping that up, and that's because there's substance to it. It's ultimately, I think, more compelling to much of the population than what the sort of far right forces are putting forward. So I thought I'd talk a couple other things, Palestine related, flowing out of the McGill question. Paul Salvatore just today published an article in Palestine Chronicle that talks about this upcoming summit put on by a group called the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation. And it's basically just this anti-Palestinian hate group that calls themselves the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation. And in their upcoming conference, according to Salvatore's article, Erwin Kotler is set to speak. Well, this group, in their statement, this is what this Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation says, quote, among a whole other list of anti-Palestinian comments, says, quote, there has never been a country called Palestine, and the word was only applied to the Arabs in the land after 1964, but they are not a distinct people. So explicitly erasing Palestinians. This is a group that CIJA and a whole bunch of Israel lobby groups are supporting. Erwin Kotler is going to be speaking at. So this is something to be, I think it's happening in November, something that there should be more developments coming, and hopefully there should be some campaigning on Kotler for participating in this, because a few, I guess, couple months ago now, when Kotler was going to speak at the a settlement Ariel University, we were able to cause a bit of a stir on Twitter and online, and he withdrew from that. So I think this is a potential a target for that type of campaign, because these are serious extremists, and Kotler tries to be a bit more sophisticated. His, so special, the Trudeau government's special envoy to combat anti-Semitism tries to hide the real objective, which is to promote apartheid and to undercut Palestine solidarity. He tries to hide it in slightly more sophisticated way than these folks. The final thing I want to talk about is the developments on the NDP Palestine. So very interesting. I think I talked about it last week. Jagmeet Singh put out an email with 13 demands on Palestine that were quite good. If it adopted, would go some way in lessening Canadian contribution to Palestinian dispossession. A big turnaround from some of what Singh has said in the past, where he basically, refused to even use the word Palestine in one infamous CBC interview just before the NDP convention. So a really big step forward. He kind of, his first item in the email is to basically imply that Israel is an apartheid state. And this was only, but the NDP only sent this out to emails. I know of two people who received it, Peter Larson and my father, Peter Larson from Canada Israel Talks Palestine, who wrote a story about it. And presumably it was sent to an NDP email list of people who are identified as being Palestine supporters. I know in the case of my father, he has told people he had donated to NDP in the past, and he had told those calling for donations to say, I'm never donating to NDP until there is stop blocking pro-Palestinian candidates from running, and you stop with your anti-Palestinian policies. Presumably, they're well enough organized to mark that down, and there's some sort of NDP database of people who are, said similar type things or emailed them on Palestine or whatnot. Because this 13 demands doesn't appear publicly. So it gets sent out to a bunch of people, but it never appeared, never on Twitter, never on the website, but it gets a whole bunch of media attention. First, Canada Israel Talks Palestine. Then I published a piece in Canadian Dimension. I got wide circulation. Then the Maple, the Orchard, Independent Jewish Voices, Canadian Foreign Policy Institute sent it around. CJPME, National Council of Canadian Muslims had an action alert and got large circulation on Twitter. And Heather McPherson, the foreign affairs critic, defended it in an interview with the Maple and the Orchard. So they're not backing away from it. They haven't published it, but they're not backing away from it. Now, CJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, waits basically a whole week plus when this is circulating to finally put out an action alert and press release criticizing the 13 demands. They put that out on Friday. And that was interesting. I was curious to see whether they were just going to try to ignore it. And they're kind of like, there's this game going on between the NDP PR and CJA over, well, if you don't publicize it widely, then we won't condemn it. And if it doesn't get condemned by CJA, the dominant media is probably not going to report on it. So there's a little bit of a sort of dance, a PR dance going on this question. But finally they do. Now, one thing that came out of this yesterday that's very just kind of hard to understand exactly what happened. So a Ryan Painter, who is a federal executive member of the NDP representing BC, tweets a whole bunch of times, like 6 times, criticizing the NDP for this 13 demands and retweeting, quote tweeting CJA's attack against Singh on this matter. And then I see there's a series of Zionists who come to his, say, great work, Painter. Thanks for standing up for what's right and challenging the NDP on this and this and that. So here's, a federal executive member promoting this horrible, like, CJA kind of ridiculousness against his own party. And so I basically jump in on the Twitter and I say, what do you disagree with? You disagree this is an apartheid state, and like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch say. And then he responds by saying, "This is ridiculous. Give your head a shake. It's not an apartheid state." And I obviously respond with more about CJA and other, more about human rights groups that have called Israel an apartheid state. And he attacks me. And anyways, then a whole bunch of people jump in and totally embarrass this federal executive member of the NDP on this question. But then it comes to light that this Ryan Painter has actually referred to Israel as an apartheid state on multiple occasions on Twitter, going back multiple years. So he has all these comments where he's called Israel an apartheid state, fascistic, like all kinds of really like hardline criticisms. And then at some point, according to James Hutt and Sam Hirsch, who've interacted with him and then did this research, like a year ago or so, he starts going totally down the Zionist path online, and it's a bit of a mystery of what's going on here. Some people suggest maybe it was possible. It's unlikely, but possible. Like some Israel lobby group is like actually literally paying him. Probably not. The other possibility, people suggested that he's got this like media relations firm and he sort of make a career of it and get some controversy, and he thinks that there's some way in which this might advance him on that front. He also appears to work with some NDP, I think, provincial members of the legislature in BC. Also, what I found is that he seems to have been doing a bunch of stuff with Randall Garrison. He's out in Victoria, done a bunch of stuff with Randall Garrison, who is the NDP MP who's on the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Group, which is basically an Israel lobby group. And I'm not going to get into it into detail, but there's a public letter coming out critical of the NDP for still being part of the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Group. That should be coming out later this week. There'll be more to be said on that. Nonetheless, the point in getting into some detail on this is that clearly the question of Palestine is totally rattling through the NDP structure. There is some advancements, there's some steps forward. There's also some very weird backroom kind of shenanigans going on this. It's hard to, make sense of exactly, what is going on. But we have seen some positive developments on that front. And I think it's a perfect moment to not just, sort of celebrate the gains that have been made, but to use the fact that the NDP is making these demands of liberals on Palestinian rights, increasingly suggesting that Israel is an apartheid state, and then simultaneously they're part of the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Group. How can you be saying it's an apartheid state and at the same time saying we want greater friendship with that apartheid state, right? So it's a moment to press the positive developments to get even a better step forward for the Palestinian struggle within the NDP and obviously more broadly. And I think I'll leave it at that. And if people have comments, questions, just raise your hand and go ahead.
Are you going to name someone? A few people have their hands up.
For some reason, I just can't see. I can't see the hands up thing anymore. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, Eve, I've noticed you've had that problem many times. We're gonna have to discuss it sometime this week. But here, I'll help you out. But yeah, Laura has her hands up, and followed by another person. I can't say his name, but it sounds Welsh. So
go ahead, Laura. Go ahead, Laura, and then go ahead, Mr. The Welsh sounding name person.
Okay, so I would just want to say, would you suggest that we all write to Singh and congratulate him for this, but also suggest we'd really like to see it up on his website, like be pushing him a little bit further? And also, I just wanted to ask you a broader question with the Palestinian issue is, I mean, in terms of foreign policy more broadly at this point, would you say if a person was going to vote either NDP or Green, is there one that you see under their current leadership as being stronger in a progressive direction on foreign policy?
Well, the first answer with the National Council of Canadian Muslims put out an action alert and calling people to email Singh to basically congratulate him. I think that's a worthwhile thing to do. There will be an action alert that will come out with this other public letter that I referred to around the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Group. So I would invite people later this week, and I invite people to email that as well. I would say Elizabeth May's almost for sure going to win the leadership of the Green Party.
God help us.
And Elizabeth May is better than Singh in her foreign policy. If you take a macro look at things,
Okay.
That's
you're giving her too much credit.
Yeah, there's a lot right there. But yeah, so that would be Singh. I think Elizabeth May, lots to she's denounced me. I think she called me vile or something like that in some private email to Noah Zatzman. But she's better. I mean, she didn't vote for Libya, and even on Palestine, she's actually better if you take the full thing. Even though she did all the thing with the refusing to accept the membership vote in 2016, and she's had a whole dalliance with Erwin Kotler when he was in the House of Commons, and all kinds of bad things she did on Venezuela and Iran and stuff like that I don't disagree with. But nonetheless, I would still say she's slightly better than Singh, partly just due to dynamics within the Green Party, partly due to just like as the fifth party, your margin, your electoral margin just pushes you towards taking some positions that are not everyone else is taking. I think I should say I do believe that, and I think we mentioned this previously, but the part of the explanation for the position NDP has been taking, the more aggressive position of Palestine, is as a way to differentiate from the liberals when their position on Ukraine and China is so bad. right? They're so bad on Ukraine and China, and that the Palestine has become, I think there's two elements to it. One is that there's been these positive developments within the party, there's activist movement within the party. Then there's outside criticism of the NDP. So those two things have shaped NDP going in a better direction. Simultaneously is this question of a way to differentiate from the Liberals, and in a context where they've been so bad on Ukraine, and when I say bad on Ukraine, what they really mean is supportive of the proxy war with Russia, and also on China. They've really gone along with the whole sort of drum beats around China, whole different elements to the China ramping up of tensions. Is that so? Palestine has become a way, and a lot of people who are very active on Palestine would often be people who have a sort of anti-militarist kind of ethos, and so are pretty like a little uncomfortable about the NDP position on Russia and maybe on China. And so as partly as a way to undercut some of that criticism, I believe that Heather McPherson, the foreign affairs critic, has pushed the Palestine issue more than she may otherwise have. So that's part of the context as well. But you got to. I think we should be clear that this is what's happening. That doesn't mean that them taking better positions in Palestine is not a good thing. It is, and doesn't mean we shouldn't keep pushing on the Palestine question. We should. We should just understand some of the context, and we should also be pushing on the Russia position and the militarist position in general. And yeah. So I would say that Elizabeth May, who is almost for sure going to be the leader of the Greens in a month or 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whenever the vote is, and is better than Singh.
And Gomari has his hand up, followed by Nadia and Colin Stewart.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say I would never vote for Elizabeth May just because she's a Zionist, and I know she's great in every other way. But I think she has religious convictions that lead her to always vote on the side of Zionism. And I don't think that's very good for geopolitical relationships and the peace on earth. So I'm not really for her. On the other hand, I recognize that they all suck. I don't like the NDP either. I certainly don't like the Conservatives. I'm willing to vote for some small peripheral party for the first time this time, just to continue voting in a broken system and be a participant in the electoral sham that we have. So that's my feeling. I also think that Canada will never recognize, nobody in power will ever recognize Canada. I mean, Israel is an apartheid state officially or for very long, because Canada is an apartheid state in many ways. We have, if you read the Indian Act, you know that Indigenous people, we have a two-tier system, and Indigenous people are not treated, don't have the same rights, and don't even have the same recognition of rights as white people in our country. So obviously, as a colonial apartheid state ourselves, we're not going to really be pointing fingers at other colonial apartheid states, because we don't want to draw attention to that fact. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, in terms of Elizabeth May, I mean, I think there is true that she has a bit of Christian Zionist disposition to her, and I've written about.
She always wears a cross, if you've ever noticed.
Yeah, she's clearly. I mean, she trained to be not a priest, but a
nun. I don't know.
No, she's Protestant, but she went to seminary school, I believe. I can't remember the details right now, but so yeah, but I mean that's I have no desire to defend Elizabeth May, but Elizabeth May has also come out on after she's I think she even said it was worse than apartheid South Africa after her trip to the West Bank and Gaza 2 years ago, maybe, or something like that. So she's really been all kind of over on the issue. It's kind of she kind of goes where she's pushed, and there's some different dynamics like that. But
fair enough. Everything could change between now and the next election, just to say.
So yeah, and I think that there's an analogous situation to Europeans coming and dispossessing First Nations as dispossessing Palestinians. The active level in the here and now of discrimination by and violence by the Israeli state is magnitudes different than what goes on within Canada's borders. So I think that there is
sorry to interrupt, Eve, but was South Africa that violent? I don't think so, but nonetheless, they were an apartheid state. They invented the word. It's an Afrikaans word, apartheid. It's racial segregation. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I just think that
no, you're right. It's not the same level of violence, but it's not acknowledged here, and that's a big part of the problem. Anyway, I've stopped interrupting. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think the South Africa thing is very interesting also to look at. I mean, I totally agree with the fact that what Israel is doing to Palestinians is substantially worse than what South Africa did to the Black population. If you look at the level of killing, it's not even comparable. If you look at the like the Bantustans, they were far bigger landmass than Gaza, for instance, and and of course the most important part from the Canadian dimension to it all is that Canada was heavily complicit with the part of South Africa, but is far more deeply entangled with Israel and supporting Israel's policies. But go ahead. I guess it's is it Colin?
Nadia.
And then Colin.
Yeah, hi, Eve. Thank you for this presentation. I'm just wondering, disrupting conferences, I wonder if this is really a good method of getting through to the politicians or whoever else is in power. I'm wondering, you said that there was a campaign against Cutler, and you succeeded in making him go back and not participate in the. So I'm just wondering, they say that the pen is mightier than the sword, and I'm just wondering if maybe campaigns or writing or tweeting or
no one has suggested the sword here. No one is suggesting the sword.
No, but I mean, going and insulting people like that guy did is totally unacceptable, I'm just wondering, and you said that when you disrupted the McGill rector, it wasn't even covered by the media. So I'm just wondering if the Palestinians, like today, they say there's a celebration of when they stormed the games in Germany, and they killed a lot of people. I'm just wondering if they renounce completely using violence against Israel. I'm not saying that Israel is right. Israel is definitely wrong, and it's an apartheid state, and they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But I'm just wondering if you were to use peaceful means of resisting, like Mandela did in South Africa, then I think Israel wouldn't have a leg to stand on and say, well, they are killing us and we're defending ourselves. They wouldn't have a leg to stand on. I'm just wondering, maybe that might be a better, more effective than just going on a violence spree or disrupting conferences. What do you think?
Well, first thing, I would completely tease out those two questions. Those are, in my mind, it's two totally different issues. The Palestinian right to resist their occupier, I think they have that right under international law. That's clear.
not with violence.
Yeah, of course they do. They had, like,
With violence? They have a right with violence?
Yes, of course. Yesterday, they blew up, or there was an effort to blow up a bus carrying IDF soldiers, and they do. They have that right. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, you can debate that, but they have that right under international law. Now,
they are killing innocent people. How does this help their cause?
I think there's all kinds of strategic questions that we discussed. Do I think that it's a good idea to kidnap the Israeli Olympics, athletes, and what happened in Munich 50 years ago? Okay, but you also have to look at some of the strategic questions that were motivating that at the time of trying to put the Palestine question on the international agenda and stuff like that. I'm not defending kidnapping athletes at Olympic Games and then ultimately killing quite a few of them. But there are these contexts of, so within Palestinian violence, you have to tease out different questions, right? You have to questions of going and blowing up a pizzeria or kidnapping athletes versus trying to blow up a Israeli military bus. Those are also questions that have to be teased out. Now, but I mean that's for Palestinians, and also the other part to that question is that there was the great march of return in Gaza, right, where it was peaceful. It was marching, and what did Israel do? They had sniper practice and killed 50 or so, maybe more, 50, 100, and just I think it's a couple thousand had their legs blown off by Israeli snipers, and they shot Canadian doctor Tarek Lubani, who had a doctor's thing on. They shot a whole bunch of Palestinian, killed medical people, and that was nonviolent. That was taking that let's do the nonviolent. Let's just march go to the fence, and Israel just right, and there's very little attention. So I'm not personally, I don't claim to know close to enough about internal Palestinian politics, these dynamics to say with any level of confidence what the right and wrong strategy is. I think I agree with you within the Canadian media environment. When Palestinians, obviously the Munich thing, and now the front page of the Globe and Mail on Friday, and they're really the Zionists are all really getting all they can out of that incident 50 years ago, right? Palestinians are being killed every day, and they don't care about that. But 50 years ago, right? And it's big media, whatever. Okay, I agree from a Canadian media standpoint, these strategies don't seem to make sense to me. I totally agree with that. Whether the Palestinian resistance movement can be based upon a Canadian media strategy, now that's a whole other question. Now, what we have control over, and what I completely wholeheartedly believe we need to be doing a lot more of, and I don't consider going to a politician, I don't consider what that dude did, who I don't agree with his politics. I don't actually have a problem with his methods. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to a I think it was a community center in Peace River, Alberta, and waiting. I presumably he heard that Chrystia Freeland was coming, and going there and giving her a piece of his mind. I don't see anything wrong with that.
What did it accomplish? It didn't accomplish anything. What did it accomplish?
I don't agree with the substance of what he said at all, and I don't agree with the sexism. I don't disagree with his. I don't actually disagree with his demeanor. If you watch the video, I mean, he doesn't he never even gets very close to Chrystia Freeland. There's 4 staff members of Chrystia Freeland. They're a little sort of annoyed by it. They don't look at all scared by what he did. So I don't at all, I don't disagree with that method of individuals who dislike something that a politician is doing, bird dogging them wherever they go and trying to give them a piece of their mind. Now we get into more interesting questions of what are we actually doing when we're doing that? There's an objective here. Well, when you're doing that, at a press conference or a place where there's lots of media, part of what we're doing, what I'm doing when I do that, is that the politicians who have, you know, big staffs, who have access to media, they bring all that media, they organize the room, they put all the money into it, they get the whole thing organized, they set the platform, and you go there and you take advantage of the platform that they've set up on the public dime, and you try to insert some of your message into, you know, whatever messaging they're trying to do. So that to me is one of the principal objectives of disrupting a Chrystia Freeland press conference. Another objective in this process is we are an incredibly apathetic political culture. Signs of resistance tend to engender other instances of resistance, right? So part of the reason why I think people like these disruptions is because people feel like there's no one's doing anything, and it sort of gives a little bit of like positive spirit. So part of the objective is that I personally don't think that I'm going to convince Chrystia Freeland with my arguments one way or another about the substance of things. I think it doesn't hurt. You know, I think if there's no media around and it's not, and you don't film it for social media, and you just bump into, like I bumped into Valérie Plante, the Montreal mayor, I forget when that was, just walking on the street a while back. And I just sort of said, you know, we have too many cars in Montreal. We should work to get rid of cars. I don't think that's a bad thing to put something in her head that, you know, when she's on the street wandering around and people say, okay, go farther with, you know, challenging cars. I don't think that's a bad, I think that has some small political value, but it's pretty minimal political value. Doing that when there's cameras around and getting that into the dominant media, that's way more political value. Also doing it and filming it yourself and circulating it and gendering a sense of resistance and other, you know, via social media, popularizing it, far more value. So that to me is what is going on with some of these things. And it's very, 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 I'm going to repeat the varies here, dangerous for progressives to start thinking that the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada shouldn't be accessed by people in Canada. Like, let's just sit and think through what we're saying. Because there's some right-wing sexist dude who did that in a way we don't like, we should, be careful where we're going in that front. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, on that particular item, you certainly speak my mind. That makes so much sense. And it's the question that's come up here. I'm in Victoria, in BC, and have been here for about a year and a half now. I just wanted to note with respect to Randall Garrison, he's been moved from the defense critic position, and that happened in the last shakeup. And I think there was a reason for that. I think it's the kind of pressure we're putting on. So my point is, it's really important to keep that internally. I'm going down a bit of an NDP rabbit hole here, but I think it's really important to keep that pressure on. And you kind of have to look at his constituency, which is Esquimalt, which is a naval base. That's what he's hinges on. So defense critic, foreign affairs critic, I still think he has a lot to say. On the other hand, in terms of some justice issues, he seems to come across very well. He's the critic for LGBT rights and so on. So he's got a constituency there as well that needs to be looked at. The question I have is on the Israel-Palestine question. I'm going to have to write the letters myself pretty soon, I think. Where does Murray Rankin sit in this? Now, he's a provincial minister incorporating an Indigenous Affairs portfolio, but we have to remember that he was sufficiently credible to the Liberal government that he was appointed one of the members of the National Security Review Committee. I've forgotten precisely what the title is. And he's in an adjacent or very close constituency to Randall Garrison and to Laurel Collins, who's the environmental critic. So in this NDP rabbit hole, it isn't just Randall Garrison. We need to look at where specific people, particularly Murray Rankin, is on this to keep the pressure on the NDP. One final comment in terms of the NDP, and here somebody mentioned the Greens. I've had calls from Green Party members, active old members, say, please join the NDP and vote for Angela Madurai in the forthcoming provincial leadership election to replace Horgan. So there's some real discontent and frustration here among the Greens, and they're a kind of a natural constituency. How long they'll last could be moving over to at least for a while to the NDP. We need to keep an eye on that and see if we can work with them.
Yeah,
Maybe you want to comment on that, Eve.
yeah. Well, I would just comment on Murray Rankin. Murray Rankin was on the executive of the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Group back in 2018 when we put out the public letter calling for the NDP to withdraw from the Interparliamentary Group, and then he never withdrew. I'm pretty sure he was the one that was in the media defending it. I think was that correct? I'm not sure if that's correct, but yeah, he was quoted. I forget what he was quoted about on Palestine around that time. So yeah, he's definitely anti-Palestinian. I believe I wrote a story about him and Palestine back around that time. Oh, and also when he left, when he announced he was stepping down. So yeah, I don't know how much influence he has within the party. I think that individual I'm talking about, who's on the federal executive, Ryan Painter, who did this thing I was mentioning yesterday on Twitter, where he's attacking the party on Palestine. I think he's tied in probably with the kind of Murray Rankin, Randall Garrison, NDP kind of world in Victoria, and so that probably some of the sort of influence. But clearly, I mean, the pockets of real anti-Palestinian sort of sentiment in NDP, they're getting smaller and smaller. They really are, right? Like if you go back 50 years and NDP conventions, you had like tons of like wildly pro-Israel kind of stuff. That's all getting smaller and smaller, fewer and fewer kind of open support for Israel.
We confronted Murray Rankin in the parking lot in his constituency about a year ago, and it was around the F-35 fighter jets, and we got a long diatribe about how it's important Canada to be pro-NATO and so on. It's not just Israel, Palestine, it's a package there that
and Randall Garrison was clearly like that. Randall Garrison was a real defender of Canada purchasing fighter jets and did everything he could to, the NDP had an official policy saying they didn't want the F-35, and they never actually changed that. They still officially say they don't want the F-35, but he did everything to just kind of just ignore that, right? Even when it became clear they were going to buy the F-35, he didn't raise the issue ever. And then once it actually happened, they put out like a little simple statement that we don't agree with the F-35, and then have just dropped the issue completely, from what I can tell. So yeah, it is clearly a package of sort of a certain vision of the world, and militarism and Zionism tend to go hand in hand. And Rankin and Garrison are two examples of that within the NDP. Unfortunately, they're not the only examples, but they are two, I think, prominent forces of that kind of outlook.
Eve, I think you got one more question, and you can ignore whatever question I had planned, but you got one more question, I think, coming from Jake.
Go ahead, Jake. Thanks.
Yes, please. Thank you. First, before I ask you the question, Eve, I have a comment about the lady Nadia, I think, that said that if the Palestinians will have one fellow like Mandela, Israel will have not one leg to stand on. Not that I disagree with her 99%, I disagree with her 101%. There is no comparison whatsoever between Israel and South Africa. The standing of Israel in the world, with the government, with the politicians, with the Jewish lobbies when their media and money and influence buying politicians and so on, and the Christian Zionists, the evangelists, and so on. What's the comparison here? Case in point, Mahmoud Abbas is the puppet of Israel for many years. He does the dirty work of Israel. Did they ever slow down taking the land, taking the water, killing Palestinians, doing atrocities, putting all those settlers there? No, there is no comparison between Israel and South Africa. So 25 Mandelas will not help them either. That was the comment. The question is, now that the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, put that 13-point plan, I don't think they actually submitted it to the government. So they're waiting maybe to see what's the reaction from their own inside NDP and from outside. Then they will decide what to do with it. Is that, in your mind, the idea?
I think the idea probably first and foremost was probably fundraising. There's probably hundreds, maybe thousands even, NDP members, people around NDP who are angry on Palestine with the party and are pretty staunchly pro-Palestinian. And the NDP was sending that message first and foremost to them to get them either to fundraise again, to become a member again. That would be the first motivation, or a central motivation. Another motivation is that it fits with other things that Heather McPherson has been doing. Most notably, she has repeatedly asked the Liberals why they reject Amnesty's report from February saying that Israel's an apartheid state. So she's not calling Israel an apartheid state, but she's saying, well, what is wrong with Amnesty's reports? Very, very strongly suggesting that Israel's an apartheid state, protecting herself and the NDP with using Amnesty as a way to protect, right? And so this fits within that pattern. So my guess is the NDP calculation is, one, we want people who've been frustrated with us or have shown signs of being pro-Palestinian, we want them to donate again, we want them to become members again. And so if it just went to those people, they would be okay, it just goes to those people are a bit happier with us, maybe we get some donations. If it then becomes more widely discussed, like it did, they're prepared to defend it, right? They're not running away from it. But they know that if they decided to put that front and center, that CIJA would then somehow connect the NDP to Laith Maru scandal, or would connect the NDP to being anti-Semitic, or right, CIJA would then take the time to go at the NDP and find some Twitter account of some NDP member that said something that was anti-Semitic, and then say the whole, right? The NDP understands that the more they put behind the statement, the more the reaction from the Israel lobby will be bigger. And so they're kind of playing a dance. And I think what you're saying is also part of it, is that the NDP, if they can get a whole bunch of left-wing coverage, which they did for this, obviously they like that. They like to get, they like to have, quite frankly, they like having me, somebody who's been criticizing them endlessly, writing articles saying the NDP did good on this. Why wouldn't they want that those kind of articles circling around out there? But there's a hesitancy of how far you go, because they don't want to get a bunch of bad press that clearly CIJA, B'nai B'rith, and others are able to get, to catch the NDP or someone associated with the NDP. So I think they're walking hesitantly, and I think that this is the whole question of pushing them to pull out of the Canada Israel into parliamentary group. If they're only pushed, I think it's important that when a positive development happens on something like this, to say positive things, to say, hey, this is good, the NDP has done this. That I think we should do, and I think the National Council of Canadian Muslims action alert and posting on different groups, posting on Twitter and whatever, all does them. But I don't think that means we, simultaneously, let's do that for a week and let's get back to they're still far from where they should be, right? And let's not let like the CJA politics of, the condemnation when you put out 13 demands that should be all like absolutely ho-hum demands. Let's not let that be the end of our politics, right? Simple thing would be the NDP calling for the getting out of the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Group. That to me it should be a minimum still. So let's take the moment to push that forward, and that I think dilutes a little bit the CJA attacks as well. So yeah, I that's my guess. That's my sense of what's happening within all the sort of like the positioning and the PR that's going on this within the NDP. And the gains, the gains that happened, there was a clear gain at the last convention back in April of last year. And there was like positive campaigning, that the people who pushed the Palestine resolution, they were doing positive campaigning. They got like 50 different riding associations to endorse the resolution. That was all very good work. There's people inside the NDP. But I don't believe that would have been successful without the negative campaigning from the outside, right? And, I was probably the main person who's been doing that for multiple years, but, even the Socialist Caucus, different groups who've been like detailing the suppression that what happened at the NDP convention 2 years before that, where they suppressed the vote, right? And so I think the negative campaigners from the outside of the party provide a bit more space to the positive campaigners from within the party to seem more reasonable, to not, they don't want, if there's already been so much backlash to suppress the vote one more time. If they would have done that at last convention, there would have been even more backlash, and the party leadership is hesitant on that. And it's, it is also clearly divided, right? There's tons of divisions within there. We know there's lots of people within there, like one of the spokesperson for Jagmeet Singh, she was part of Israel Apartheid Week that my partner Bianca was part of 13 years ago. And she was, even when Singh made those ridiculous comments where he refused to use the word Palestine a year and a half ago with the CBC interview, she was his, top PR person. She knows the issue, right? She knows this is like ridiculous and that like, so we know that within there's all kinds of people who are sympathetic. There's all kinds of calculations going on. And I think that from our standpoint, or certainly from my standpoint, I have no ambition within the NDP. I feel free to hit hard. And I think that's most of the people, participating on this feel that way, hit hard. To some people who are, more working within the structure, and that has its place as well. But yeah, but on that note, we're past an hour, and it is Labor Day. It's supposed to be a holiday, so thanks everyone for coming out, and same place, same time. Take care. Have a good evening.